And we're live. Welcome back to the After Action Project, episode 108. Tonight we are joined by Jeff Boren of Boren Training Solutions, and we'll be discussing their dynamic performance pistol course. Today's episode, just like most of our episodes, are brought to you by Locked In Grip and the Range Buddy app, as well as the Firearms Radio Network. Be sure to check out the other great podcasts on the Firearms Radio Network by visiting firearmsradio.net. LockedInGrip.com is a liquid shooting sports chalk made for shooters by shooters. Have you ever lost your perfect grip after shooting a few rounds, or had your sweaty grip diminish your ability to hang on to your firearm during different weather conditions? Locked In Grip is a grip enhancer that keeps your hands free of moisture to create a slip-free connection to the action of shooting your firearm. Locked In Grip liquid shooting sports chalk is made for shooters by shooters. That's from the folks over there at the Complete Combatant. Visit LockedInGrip.com. That's LockedInGrip.com to purchase your liquid shooting sports chalk now. You guys have heard us talk about that on the podcast several times, but I do like it. I'm typically not a fan of stuff, right? I think we should just kind of keep shooting purist. And at first, I was reluctant to use it after trying some other sports chalk in a class that I took with Tom Gibbons years ago. Wasn't a big fan of it. So Andy introduced me to Locked In Grip, and kind of had me step back and reevaluate my opinion on it, or on using things. And it really does work, man. I do enjoy it. Use it at a couple action pistol matches here in Albuquerque. I definitely use it on the range for our students. Right before I demo a drill, I like to turn my hands chalky white and then, shoot a build drill or qualification shoot out here to demo for the students. The Range Buddy app is a collection of over 160 handgun shooting drills, all sorted by the required target type and filterable by the skills that you want to work on. It's available for Android and iOS. You can check it out at rangebuddy.app. There's a free version that gets you a few drills for each one of the different target types. There's a virtual instructor component, leaderboards, integrated training session tracker, and so much more. So check that out on Android and iOS. That's the Range Buddy app. But let's get into it. Let's get into what everybody came here for. That's to, put you in the student seat of Jeff's course, the Dynamic Performance Pistol course. Jeff, we had you on. We were talking in the pre-show. It's been, it doesn't feel like it's been as long as it has, but we had you back on episode 52 to review your Dynamic Pistol course, or your defensive pistol course, excuse me. And tonight we're going to be talking about your Dynamic Performance Pistol course. So do us a favor, reintroduce yourself to our new listeners. Talk to us a little bit about what got you into the firearms training industry, and then we'll kick it over to Howie to do the same.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me back. Glad to be back on. Name's Jeff Boren. I run a little training company, Boren Training Solutions. Do most of my work at Patriot Training Center down in East Aboga, Alabama. So been 22 years or 23, I lose count, public education. Spent most of those years in administration. Coached for a very long time. I was head football coach and athletic director. Naturally went over into that principal role. And what I do now is I'm a director of operations, where I run a armed staff program. So I got into all this at the evolution of that. Good friend of mine and colleague that I work with, we took a vested interest in school safety, particularly with active shooter threat, long before that was kind of cool to do. Meaning back in the mid 2000s, when we were kind of young at this, when before Parkland and Uvalde and all that, of course, obviously. And because of that, I enjoyed shooting guns. So I was already training a little bit, not seriously. And then started taking that training a lot more serious in my late 20s. And then I took my wife to a class, and she was like, "You should do this." And I was like, "I don't think I can." And she said, "Why not?" And I said, "Well, I'm not a cop and I'm not military." So then I did some research, and I found Akil Kadir and Tiffany Johnson, and went and saw them. Best decision I ever made. Got me down the path of range master and all that great stuff, and opened up all those doors, and then led to what I do now with running that armed staff program. So I'm blessed. I'm a full-time instructor. I got other responsibilities, but I get to spend a lot of time training people to save lives, and I love it.
Yeah, we were talking in the pre-show a little, Howie's down there in Florida, kind of where I grew up, my neck of the woods. And, I played a little bit of football in high school, and think his alma mater whooped up on my alma mater. So it was kind of cool how it comes back. Howie, introduce yourself to our listeners. Talk to us a little bit about what your background in the firearms world is, and then how you connected with Jeff and ended up in this class.
Sure. I started out this professional life as an attorney. I was a prosecutor in Dade County. I then went to the Department of Homeland Security. I retired from there as chief counsel, and I taught for 15 years at Miami-Dade College, primarily criminal law. So when I retired out to Ocala, I wanted to do something that I enjoyed. I always liked firearms, and took the NRA instructor classes and got with Nathan Good. And Nathan Good introduced me to Tom Gibbons at Rangemaster, and it was over after that. I met Akil Kadir, and now I own run my own company, HWM Training, out of Ocala. I'm the Chief Range Safety Officer for R&D Tactical here at the little indoor range in Ocala. Part of the CSA cadre with Akil, and I'm his road dog when he goes out and does combative pistol or whatever he needs me for. I generally go out and AI with him. I'm a brand ambassador for HK, so I get to go to a bunch of different conferences, the Mingle, Girl in the Gun, TACCon. So I get to do a bunch of fun stuff with them, and they've really been very good to me. And then that's how I met Jeff, and he's been coaching me ever since.
That's awesome, man. That's an esteemed background too. That's pretty awesome. And it's cool to see the path that folks end up on once their first or their second course is with a great and a reputable instructor. And that goes without saying for Ock and those guys. That's it's pretty cool to see. I think I don't know if they coined the term gateway student or gateway instructor, but I think that's something that that is critically important for the industry, and it's often overlooked, right? Like everybody's familiar with like the concealed carry courses or the NRA basic, firearms course, and then we see and I think where we're at are the folks that I talk to, and Andy specifically, the folks that they want to train with, where it's like high level or high like performance pistol courses, but there's a big area in the middle that I think the vast majority of gun owners would be benefited greatly if they got into one of these courses with the gateway instructor. So looking forward to having you back on in the future to review one of your courses. And tonight we're talking about dynamic performance pistol. So Jeff, talk to us a little bit about what the course requirements are for that class, and if there are any prereqs for students or like a minimum skill set.
Yeah, there is, because what this is like Howard. I do primarily gateway instruction. That's 98% of what I do and what I love. And this is kind of an evolution of that, and something that I kind of built out of basically out of that and wanting to take things to the next level. So when we're talking about what you need to come to this course, you need to have a good understanding of the fundamentals of shooting. You need to obviously be able to safely get out of the holster, back into the holster. And basically, I've kind of pretty much settled on you need to be able to draw and hit the 4-inch head circle on a Rangemaster Q target at 10 yards on demand under stress. It's kind of what you need for this course. So it's a progression of that after you begin to become proficient in the fundamentals and you want to take things to the next level is kind of what I envision with this course, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely it does. Looking at your website, it's a 2-day class, kind of designed and geared for intermediate and advanced shooters. Mm-hmm. So that makes sense that there's a minimum skill set. Howie, talk to us a little bit about the gear that you ran during that course.
I ran the HKP 30L. It's a Langdon Tactical trigger on there, and it's got the Langdon Tactical RDO. I've just been getting into it, and I've been putting it through its paces, predominantly in Jeff's classes. And it worked very well. I'm running out of a Wiley Bowman KSG Lexington, which is outstanding. It's a great little holster for speed for me. And a couple of those his Mac holders for that one. So, just generally, and everything was concealed. I don't think we had anybody outside the waistband. So we were all running concealed.
That's awesome. I love taking a class and being online with students that are running it from concealment. And that's I don't know if I think for me, it gives me I ran it from concealment, right? Like that's why you beat me in that drill. It is typically, but it's also a challenge, right? I'm like, man, if I could keep up with these guys that are running from like an open rig or, they're a competitive shooting setup, It kind of gives me a little bit more confidence at the end of the day. Jeff, what do you think, or what's the main goal for you, for you personally as an instructor? What do you want to see your students achieve through this course?
Well, just piggybacking off of what you said, and I go back to, listening to Tom Gibbons and talk about that concealment aspect and how overlooked that often is. So that really plays a big part into this course, because what are we going to be out on the street, right? If something actually breaks out, what are you going to have? You're going to be working from concealment with your everyday carry gear. So the whole point of this class, again, is to build off of that basic fundamental skill set and take that up. And I want to elevate proficiency and confidence in these guys. I want to challenge them on their technical skills, on their application of those skills, and introduce them to time management. And what I mean by time management is, we can sit there and shoot 2-second bill drills all day long, but when is that appropriate? When is that not appropriate? How does that apply to what you're seeing and what you're actually facing out there? And that's a big portion of the class. So what I like to do with that is almost think of a song that starts with a very slow cadence, then the tempo just rises, and then we crash back down. So, we're hopefully, if I'm doing what I'm wanting to do and I'm doing it right, that's what you're getting. Getting a lot of that challenging aspect of how do I need to attack this problem. So that's really what I want. And I want it to be demanding, but I want it to be supportive, is what I'm looking to do right there. So, yeah, really, that's what it comes down to, is I want to take those foundational skills. I want to build that proficiency as high as we can in those 2 days that we have. I want to be able to apply those, and I want to be able to do that appropriately as that situation demands. And, a line I got from Akil, I want them thinking with the gun, right? So what does that look like? And drills are one thing, but progressing those drills in a manner that makes sense and making us think about how we're applying those, I think goes a long way in that development.
Makes sense. You touched on, you mentioned challenging, right? You want to challenge students. Howie, talk to us about that a little bit more. What was the most challenging part of this course for you?
Oh, wow. Well, everything about this course is challenging. I think we started out doing a course of fire on a 2-inch dot. I think we started out with doing a course of fire back to 10 yards on a 2-inch dot in a very short time frame. It was a type of training where I think you have to kind of understand Jeff's context. He works in an environment where time equals more bodies, right? For the people he's training in the school protection program. So there's an urgency to the level of performance that one must have when doing this work. And it's kind of a combination of some of the best parts of like competitive training and tactical training. It's not just being able to get the gun out and shoot fast. It's about making accurate hits in the shortest amount of time and making good judgments when you're doing it. So he interleaves a bunch of different skill sets on that first day. We started out very difficult, and then we worked down actually to the qualification. I think the most challenging thing for me was the reality-based training. We did some reality-based training, and I think that was the most challenging for me mentally. And that's the one where I made the most mistakes. But it was such an insightful and learning environment doing that. I think it was really the highlight of the class. I want Jeff to talk about that. I think it's one of the best things that we did over those 2 days. All of it was good, but that aspect of reality-based training where we had, I think it was 4 modules where we ran through, it was just done so well. And because I was working with Jeff, I was able to watch other students run through it, and that was amazingly instructive to see how different people approached that scenario. So yeah, I think that was not only the most challenging, the most fun part of it, but also where I learned the most.
Jeff, dig into that a little bit more. And it was, when he's talking about reality-based scenarios and reality-based training, it kind of brought me back to a post that I saw on Facebook from an instructor that I follow. And he was talking about, the square range should be used for, most of your time on the square range should be used for developing skills with the handgun and not much. And it kind of implied that we shouldn't, in their opinion, shouldn't be worrying about some of the other stuff that we see on the range where folks are working through tactics and and scenarios. And I kind of disagree with that. And I like that Howie mentioned that you run your students through some reality-based training in this course. So talk to us a little bit more about that and the philosophy on why you bring that or why you integrate that with this course.
Well, just again, what you just said. I mean, we build skill on the square range, right? But that's got to be applied in a 360-degree range. So we've got to consider background. Rule 4 is the most overlooked, under-respected rule that we have, safety principle that we have, and we don't practice it well. So the reality-based training does a good job of that. But what it does is it takes away the blank target, and it makes you consider what you're facing, and you have to look at something that you have to shoot, and you have to make a decision. And there's no marked scoring zones. You got to make appropriate hits, and there's no. So the way we set this up might make more sense. So big shout out to Ed Monk, who I got a lot from, right? When I went to his class several years ago and took his active shooter course, really helped set me down the path to develop what I do. So I'm a big fan of photorealistic targets, and I'm a big fan of setting up those scenarios to make people go in blind with a little bit of information, and then they've got to deal with that problem. Because we have these drills that we run on the square range. They're a prescribed amount of rounds in a prescribed amount of time, and then that's that. So where do we see as instructors the most problems with our students? On the last round fired of the drill, right? They know that's it, so we don't follow through. We don't recover the shot. We're trying to look at the target. But in a reality-based setting, that doesn't happen because they have to – I hate using the term slow ourselves down, but they have to – pay more attention to what they're doing, and they don't have that set number of rounds they're going to fire particularly. They've got to solve a problem. And when they do that, I think that you see a lot more of the fundamentals are actually applied through that reality-based training. But what it really does, I think the best part of it is it exposes you to something that you haven't been exposed to yet if you hadn't done any of it. So if you hadn't done any form of reality-based training, you hadn't done any force on force, and you have to go in, you have to deal with these targets that actually look like people. Some of them might be kids, and I'll give something away here. I threw them out a pregnant woman that was holding the gun.
He's a horrible man.
The emotional reaction that I get from that is fascinating. And as Howie said, I was very blessed. I had Howard was here. Akil was at that course. So I had some really good shooters that took that course. And after they ran their scenario, I let them go with me so they could see how this worked. And I think Howard can back this up. The variety of emotions that you see after someone runs through one of these little courses of fire is fascinating. And the way that people see how it played out, the way the targets make them feel. You know, for example, we had a female student in the course, and there was no hesitation on the pregnant lady. Zero. Where the men hesitated, right? And then when you break that down and you get the answers to the questions, it's really fascinating stuff. But, yeah, I mean, so I love it, and I think it's something we should be doing a whole lot more of in our training.
Years ago, and I forget the police department, they kind of came under some scrutiny for using photorealistic targets, and I believe it was they had pictures of, armed teenagers. I think there was a pregnant woman in there, and they got some backlash for it, and I was like, well, it's not outside the realm of possibilities that a pregnant woman, solicits a deadly force response from somebody, whether it be a police officer, an armed citizen. And kind of you saw it and you mentioned it, you're right there, right? Like you said the woman had no problem, right? She didn't hesitate, but the men did. And if we're talking about a high stakes, game for lack of a better word of life and death, right? That hesitation could cost you your life.
Sure.
And I was trying to pull up the news article, and then, the only thing I see is, Georgia, recently. So with their stuff, but it was years ago. I think it was like 6 or 7 years ago, maybe longer, depending on where I'm at in the time warp. So Howie, I want to kick it back to that first day of the class. Walk us through, after the range safety brief, the medical, all that good stuff. Once you guys get in there, you start warming up. What does that first day look like for you as a student?
Well, we did about a half a day or maybe a third of a day in classroom. And we went over the objectives of the course, tactical anatomy, mindset, acclimating ourselves to the violent environment in which we live. Some really good technical information, particularly for instructors, about how we're going to develop our skills. We did our range brief, then we went to the range, and he just started out. I mean, this is clearly an intermediate course. He just started out gangbusters. Like, there was no warm up. You get no warm up in just class. We stood on the line, and the first thing we did was a qual on the parrot, on the RTF cue. It's like a 2-inch circle on both sides. The first thing we did was a qual on that, and it got harder from there, and then it got easier. It was interesting to see how he developed the course. Even though I kind of knew some of the things that were going to go on, I was still intrigued by how everything came together in the end and how much better everybody got as a result of the way he organized the material. Because we started with such a difficult standard in the beginning, 2-inch dots, 3 seconds. By the time we got to the qual was easy. Everybody was looking at the qual and going, "Oh, is this what we're doing? Oh, this is great." And the qual was still challenging, but based upon, looked at in the whole over what we had done, it was easy in comparison to what we started with. And I think everybody felt that. So it was really great that first day going through the process the way he had it set up.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, right? Where you ramp it up and it's challenging, and then you kind of ramp it back down. One of the things that I found in our classes with new students, specifically working on their draw to first shot time, is if we start off slow, right? I give them, a 5-second, really slow and deliberate, and then we work it up, and then really crank it up. And on the time, I'll give them 1 second part time, but I don't tell them what it is. So then they're really chasing that second. And then I bump it up to 1.5 seconds, which is kind of the goal for that particular course, or that particular drill, is to get our students under 1.5 seconds draw to first shot, and it becomes easy for them. And prior to that, I asked the question, "Hey, how fast do you think you can present your handgun from the holster and get a shot within the 6-inch circle?" And it's like, 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 2 seconds. But generally, folks typically think 1.5 seconds is outside of the reach, and to see them achieve that in a relatively short amount of time. But I credit that to the, you ramp it up, so it's more difficult than what you want them to do. Because it might come to a surprise some folks, and probably not a surprise to you all. It's hard to get students to shoot faster than they can, or get them to shoot at the pace that they can shoot, right? Typically they're not sandbagging. They just don't think they can shoot it as fast as they actually can. The other thing, and Andy and I, when we're working on, draw to first shot at 25 yards, we'll go back to 40 or 50, and we'll use that same size target. And then everything at 25 is easy. It's easy work. So Jeff, talk to us a little bit about your philosophy on the drills that you're running in the class, and why you start off with the qual and the 2-inch dots.
I call it descending training for exactly what we were just discussing. It's a confidence issue. And if I learned anything while I was coaching for all those years, is that we can do what we want to do if we don't hold ourselves back. I think too many times we tell ourselves we can't do something, and we limit that off the front end, and we don't expect that. But the reason I start off with what I do is call it it's a little three series course of fire, and I call it the parrot is what it is. It goes out to 10 yards, and it's all shot on a parrot on a Rangemaster Q target with some decently challenging par times right there. But I believe when you start someone off like that, you immediately ramp up the adrenaline, you immediately ramp up the pressure. So what are we doing? We're getting rid of that novel stimuli right off the start, getting that over with, getting it done, so everybody's not waiting on a qual on Sunday afternoon. They're like, "Oh God, I got to shoot parrots out to 10 yards, and I've got to do it in the same time standard that I shoot these other courses of fire on an 8-inch circle." Yes, just do it. And they all realize, well, I can, right? But then that works into a shoot the face course of fire, which goes to the 4-inch head circle on the same Q target, and then works itself down to that the qualification course of fire, which I call the standard, right? Because we're not responsible for everything we do with our gun. We're accountable for it. So why not strive for performance with accuracy that we can talk about what we're doing as we're doing it because we're thinking about it. And I think if we build that reservoir skill and we hold ourselves accountable to a high level of performance, that's only going to help us at the end of the day. God forbid we ever have to do this for real, right? So I think when you train that way, at least this is my philosophy and this is why I do this, is when you build confidence, you don't see hesitation, right? Michael Jordan, I preach about Michael Jordan in my classes, as Howard can tell you. And it's not because he was such a great basketball player, but he had the ultimate will that you're not going to stop him from doing what he wanted to do. And why did he have that thought? Because he believed in himself. And because he believed in himself, he was able to do the things that he did. And I think we need to have that kind of attitude when it comes to this. I'm not talking about being cocky or overconfident, just the skill, the belief in my skill set that I can get the job done. And then it's about winning the fight, right? So I think all that ties in. Well, I don't think I know. That's why I wrote the program the way I did, to start with that descending training and work down to what we absolutely must need to do if we're going to carry a gun, right? So hopefully that made sense, the nerding out there.
No, it does. And I want to take a second to kind of sidestep away from the course and talk more about, being a coach and an instructor. And specifically, when we talked about it, at the beginning of the show, not having a military or a law enforcement background and how, we typically perceive that as an obstacle that we have to overcome to get into the firearms training, right, to become a firearms instructor. And I don't know if I've talked to too many firearms instructors, and you might be the first one that we've had on the podcast that has come from a coaching background, right, where you've had the experience actually coaching folks at that level. So how do you feel that having that skill set coming into the firearms training world has helped you kind of with the success that you've had and the success that your students have?
Well, I mean, I think it is everything for me because all I know is teaching and coaching. I started when I was 17, helping my coaches coach junior high kids. That continued on. I coached all the way through college. I went to Mississippi State, so at Starkville Middle School, I was coaching football. And then I went into the classroom at 22 and I started teaching and coaching. So I don't know anything else, right? So I think the big thing that I take away from that is I learned how to structure things through teaching curriculum in the classroom. And I taught for most of my teaching career. I taught state tested courses, so I had to perform. My kids had to pass those tests. So that was good for me in that development. And then, of course, when you're coaching football in the South, your ass better win. you don't have a choice. And I still remember it like it was yesterday. If you go home at midnight, 1 o'clock on a Friday night after a win, there's the next Saturday. I don't care what the weather looks like. I don't care what else is going on in your life. Life is grand. But if you lose for 7 days, you got to sit there and eat it, right? So that competitive desire, I want my students to have that winning feeling. And I'm a little bit maybe different. I don't know. I get excited when my people do good things. I mean, I'm not going to yell and scream when someone's shooting a gun, but after the drill's over and the gun's put up, I'm going to celebrate that. And I think that just comes back to that coaching philosophy and how fired up I get about it, because I want to see them succeed. I want to see them do well. And unfortunately, I've seen some of the violence in this world, and I don't want the people that come through my courses not to be ready to deal with that, So, yeah, I think it plays a big part in how I do things.
That's awesome. You mentioned something there that I think is often overlooked in the firearms training world, and I don't know if it's the same and I doubt that it's the same in other industries where you're coaching or teaching somebody, and that's the curriculum development piece of that. And that's not something that you get in the NRA, the NRA or the USCCA instructor program, right? They're not talking you through how to develop a curriculum. Generally, like with the NRA, they give you their playbook, right? They give you their slides, their PowerPoints, and they say, you cannot deviate from this. This is what you have to teach. And And I think that curriculum development piece is very critical, because it's not just, or it can very easily become, I'm just going to supervise this range session. I'm going to have a list of drills that they're going to run through, and I'm going to hope that nobody asks me why we're working on this drill. And if you look at it from that, that 10,000 foot perspective, the drills really don't kind of complement one another, and it's not a progressive, it's not progressive, right? And that's one of the things that I didn't realize when I first started taking firearms courses, and it's not something that I've realized when I first started teaching firearms courses, right? And it's something that Andy and I talk about often. We're talking about adding another monthly rotation deal to our course offerings. And it's like, hey, we have to get out and we have to hammer out the curriculum, and we have to make sure that it's going to be progressive drills, and being very intentional about what we do, so that every time a student pulls the trigger, it's a valuable trigger press, and it's something that they're learning from. And we can look back and we can say, hey, this was, our students are better because we did what we needed to do. So it's cool to hear you talk about that. And I think we probably should spend an entire episode on that, curriculum development piece, because it's not, I think Howie mentioned it in his introduction as well, right? It's something that's easy to overlook as a student. So I think it becomes almost not critical or not important to a lot of folks out there that are teaching people how to, pull the trigger on a gun. So that was kind of my soapbox rant on that. I want to kick it back over to Howie and I want your perspective on some of the other students that you saw in this class. Were they competitive shooters? Were they law enforcement? What did that student body makeup look like for you as a peer in that course with those folks?
We had some phenomenal shooters, and we had some emerging shooters. I think it would be a good way to say it. And what was fascinating to me was how much better the emerging shooter got, and how much better the advanced shooters performed, even when they didn't think they were going to be able to perform the task given. I think one of the things overlooked by Jeff is he's such a great coach. Sometimes I'll go to a high-level class, and it will just be organized drills with no input from the instructor. But Jeff's coaching background, the reason why I love working with Jeff is because he makes me better. He's able to pick out the things that are making me inefficient, my hesitations, and he's able to point those out as I'm doing the drills, which is great. He gave me the whole class was worth just one piece of advice the man dropped on me that weekend, which took a quarter second off my time on my draw to first shot, which is just insane because I've been doing this for a minute. It was really great. Jeff is such a phenomenal coach, and he works every student differently, which is, he's hard on some people and he takes it easy with some of the other ones. There are gross corrections and there are fine tuning that he's doing. Akil Kadir was one of the shooters, to give you an idea of the level of shooter that we had there. And I think Jeff had comments with just about everybody in that class. It was just interesting to watch him work and, trying to emulate some of that, trying to get some of that in mind. You talked about curriculum. I don't think I've seen anyone outside of Tiff and Ak and Jeff teach curriculum, like how to get these classes together and the methodology. I think we can come to it as an instructor from any background, but actually the educators that are in this game, like Tiffany and Jeff, bring that curriculum base, and it's just so important for us to stay organized and have an understanding of how we're teaching our students. It really is. I think you would be well served to have Jeff discuss it. He just helped me form a new curriculum for a new class.
One of the things that I don't think instructors get a lot of credit for is the nuance that it takes to effectively teach a course where there's a wide range in the skill set of the students, right? It's easy to teach somebody, it's easy for me to get up there and teach a class of, 10 or 15 people that have never held a handgun before, right? Because it's going to be, everybody kind of starts at that same baseline level, and we're going to kind of progress at the same pace. There'll be some outliers, right? But you're not taking somebody who is taken their concealed carry course, and they've taken maybe an intermediate level course. And then you have folks that have taken, courses with Ock or Tim Herron or Tom Gibbons, right? And then you have this huge gap in skill set and the nuance that it takes for an instructor to give that new shooter what they need, but also give that top level performer in that class what they need to kind of get to their next level. And Jeff, what I want you to talk on it for a minute, if you don't mind, is how do you manage that as an instructor in this course?
Well, first, it fits my ADHD extremely well because I'm all over. So, but no, I love it because it keeps me on my toes. It keeps me focused. It keeps me paying attention because when I'm planning a course, I have an in-state goal in mind. I have standards and objectives that need to be met. And there's minimums, and some of those students are going to go above that minimum. Some are going to have to find a way to meet those minimum standards and objectives. So the balance in that is, number one, it just drives me nuts when a shooter that's doing well never gets coaching during a course, right? I mean, if you've been there, you know what that's like. I paid $700 and all I'm doing is shooting at a target. I have no idea if I'm getting any better, right? So that's a challenge in and of itself, especially when somebody's doing good. So I think the best way to explain this is like with that group, we had 10 students. So we did have a mix. We had some of those emerging where you would start calling them, they're getting into the intermediate level. And then we had some really high level students. So, having some discussions with each of them before class started helps tremendously if you're able to do that. Because I knew going in, like taking Howard and Akil, for example, they're going to see Gabe White in a couple of months. My goal was to get them to turbo pin level, right? That was the goal and objective for them in that course. I don't have to teach them any fundamentals. I have to clean stuff up for them, right? But for my emerging students, I got to develop that confidence. I've got to continue to develop the fundamental skills. And then for my guys and gals in the middle, I've got to try to elevate them. So I think having a plan for that, because even if you don't have that previous information for the students, we all know if we've been doing this long enough, who's about to walk into that class. The only question is how many is going to be in this column, how many is going to be in this column, how many is going to be in this one, and what is my plan for those individuals, and how am I going to treat them based on their personality, their confidence, how they're reacting emotionally. I think we got to do our homework before we get to class, or we're not going to be successful in that. And we've got to have that plan in place. And, I carry 8 lesson plans for every class. And usually all 8 gets used in some form or fashion, right? Because of that. And I think it really comes down to me personally is I have to do my job weeks in advance of that class to be prepared to deal with the different personalities, skill sets, and needs of those students before they even get there.
Man, and that starts getting into adult learning theory, which is another area where you don't get that as a brand new firearms instructor. And I know I know those guys implement that into their gateway instructor program. And you're right, man. It's critical. You do have to approach each student differently, right? There are some folks, like you said, there are some folks that they're not going to respond well to that stern voice in their ear.
No.
Then there are other folks that aren't going to respond well to that kind of empathetic coaching voice either. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to. Hey, tell me I suck. Tell me why I suck, and tell me how to fix it. That's what I need to hear.
Absolutely.
And you can be mean to me, right? I appreciate it when you're mean to me out there because, all right, cool. Let's do better.
But we're an exception to the rule. People ask me what I like about Tom Gibbons, and I'll tell them straight up without hesitation. He will tell me the truth. I don't have to wait for it. It's right there. And if I do something wrong, he will tell me, and I will be able to fix that. But that doesn't work for everyone. We're, stealing another line from McKeel, they ain't us, right? So we have to consider that, and we have to be able to handle those different personalities in those different ways that meet their needs at the end of the day, regardless of how we feel about that. We've got to get that job done, plain and simple.
Yeah, absolutely. Andy's my go-to guy on that, man. He's a great read for people, and last time we were out on the range together, we had a group of students, and I'm sitting there working. We had a lady that was she was left-handed, I think she had an injury at some point that she became felt more comfortable shooting with her right hand, but she was left eye dominant. So she wasn't technically cross eye dominant, but for the purposes of shooting, she was. And I'm over there overcomplicating crap, right? Making it more difficult. I'm like, hey, let's do this. And then let's figure this out. And then we're going to have you do this. And then halfway through the class, Andy and I will kind of switch students that we're working with. And I'm working with a student, and my ears perk up because I hear him unfucking everything that I just did. And then I just breathe a sigh of relief, because then in the entire 2 to 3 minutes after I'd got done doing all that crap, I was like, oh, man, that was a lot of words I used a lot of words that's not necessary, right? Like, I'm making this harder than it needs to be. And sure enough, he went over there, unfucked it, and we talked about it afterwards. And I was like, man, I'm so glad you did that, because you're right, it wasn't necessary. And I started getting into holster selection, and are you present with your dominant hand, your left hand or your right hand, and he's like, scratch all of that. Let's work on this stuff. We'll get it figured out. I was like, man, I'm glad I had you there for that, Andy, because I did. I made it overcomplicated, or made it more complicated than it needed to be. And I felt like an idiot as I was walking away. So how have you implemented some of those things that you took away from this course in your practice session and training sessions, and then as an instructor as well?
In terms of my own personal development, some of the things I've been learning that I learned from Jeff, I am putting into practice. I am getting ready for Gabe White's class. I missed Turbo Kim by one run last time, and it's been gnawing at me daily. So I've been a big purchaser of MagTech steel ammo, and I'm just doing build drills with this new technique and just trying to hone that down, because I'm not going to do that again. And we're working with Jeff. So I've been working on the technical aspects of improving my performance that I learned from Jeff. I'm hoping to get back with him again before I go out there and make sure that I'm doing it appropriately and properly, according to what he's saying and what he's teaching me. I might just do video with him. In terms of an instructor, what I loved was the interleaving, the descending training, and I learned a great deal, not only from him, but from Barry, another coach in the class, about how to motivate individual students who are having some issues, dealing with them psychologically as opposed to just technically, because it's not sometimes just a technical problem. You got to get into their head to get them to where you need them to be. And watching how Jeff worked those people was very instructive to me. And how he put together the RBT was exceptional. Watching, I think everyone approached that reality-based training differently. That's how well it was executed. And to see things that we talk about in our classes, the blindness that's associated with stressful events, like things that you don't see. Where was the gun pointed? People just wholly missed the fact that these targets had holes in them. No one saw the holes in the target when they came in to do the reality, when they came in to do it. No one saw where the shots were. We asked, did you see the holes? No, I didn't see any holes. It was amazing to see psychologically how the stress of this fake event worked on people. So I was really impressed by that, and I did not think that we were going to get the results that we did. So I definitely want to, in some way, integrate. I primarily teach Gateway, but I think even in a Gateway class, a little bit of that reality-based training, I think would be important. And I'm going to try and integrate that in some way into those first classes to give them a glimpse of what it's like making these decisions in the real world, which is very, very interesting and insightful. So I took a lot, I always take a lot away from Jeff. And because I have a personal relationship with him, I get to bounce things off of him. He's always very open to reviewing my work and bouncing things off. Him and Akil both are kind of, you were talking about working with Andy and him being able, I get that every time I work with these guys. I get to AI for AAP. I'm like, okay. Yeah, I'm an idiot. And I get to watch Jeff, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I probably could have said that a lot better. So yeah, I get that feeling constantly. It's just, it's great to have friends that are such phenomenal instructors, but it does lead you to this feeling of incompetence and not being good at this.
I get it. Yeah, and two things that I would between now and your Gabe White course, check out the locked in grip if you haven't, because it does make a difference. Andy, when he was RSOing at TACCON this year, he said that they didn't allow it for the competition,
for the match.
which is pretty cool. But I do notice an improvement in my shooting because I fidget with my hand less, right? And we see it out there, and I don't know if it's milking the grip, but it's that thing, you do that, right? And it's for me, it's almost second nature, right? Because I feel the sweat on my hands, but when I have some locked in grip on there, one less thing that I'm having to worry about. And then the Range Buddy app, you can kind of track your performance and your progress over time in the different drills with the integrated leaderboard, and then also with your training session, tracker, or the training log in there. So you can go back and you can review your performance on each one of those drills. I've talked about it before, but Andy and I, we were working bill drills, and he gave me an attaboy after I shot a bill drill, and I was like, I don't know if that's better than I've shot it before, because I don't take notes. I famously have write in the rain notepads that I have in my range bag for when I'm taking classes or whatever. But I don't use. I've never logged like my drill performance, just because it's in the range bag. It's not in my pocket. So check those two things out: lockedingrip.com and rangebuddy.app. I want to kick it back over to that class, though. Jeff, as an instructor, what do you think has been the biggest aha moment for you over your career, of whether it's coaching athletics or coaching firearms specifically? What was like your biggest aha moment as an instructor?
Easily when I learned how to cut all the stuff out that didn't need to be there and get what they needed and get that put into the curriculum and have that flow throughout the course. I mean, that's hands down the answer to that question, is just cut out the crap, that does not need to be there. And, I learned that from Akil first, and then I got to see Tom do it, and, all these other great instructors. And of course, as you progress, you get to go to see these great instructors, the Gabe Whites and all these other people in the huge group of people that's at TACCON every year. And you get to watch those master instructors work and learn how to do that. And it's a very big deal to me anyway, because what do we want to do? We want to teach them everything that we can, but we can't do that, right? So we've got to drill that down into what they need and what is the scope of this course, right? And I think that's the big deal. It's very easy because we're all so passionate, us instructors that do this. We want to give them all that we can give them, but we've got to stay within the scope of that course. And once I learned how to do that better, I'm still trying to get better at that, but that was the biggest help that I've had, was learning to stay in my lane, with what I'm trying to teach in that course.
That's a big lesson to learn. And it is an important lesson to learn, right? Because I joke about it with students in class, and I say, it's not complicated. I could make it sound complicated and probably charge a little bit more money, but shooting is pretty basic stuff. So when we're talking about eliminating some of that crap that isn't important, on the other side of that, what, in your opinion, what are some of the things that we absolutely must focus on with students at every stage outside of the firearm safety, right? Like once we check, we make sure that everybody's safe with a firearm. And then I'm going to kick this question over to you, Howie, as well. But I want kind of Jeff lead us off into that conversation. What are those things that we can't skip?
Yeah, I think you're talking about as we progress. Yeah, I think we have to continually hammer safety, especially the higher up we go. Because what happens when you get 15 people out there that's been running a gun for 15 years? Complacency sits in. So I think we owe that to be accountable to each other to continue to drive home the safety aspect. But I think the main thing is to never stray away from the fundamentals. Because regardless of what we're doing, if it's a defensive tactical type shooting or the USPSA match, what does it all really come down to? It all really comes back to the fundamentals. I have a thought that some people look at me like I'm very crazy when I say it, but I believe it. The old saying that slow is smooth and smooth is fast or whatever. I don't believe that. I believe that slow is slow and fast is the fundamentals mastered. And that's where that speed comes from. And I'll never be convinced otherwise. So to me, everything drills back down to the fundamentals. And how do you develop those fundamentals? Well, you start with a base to the path towards proficiency. And once we get a good portion down that path towards proficiency, we start expanding that. And that continues to evolve and continues to grow. But I think at the end of the day, we never stray away from those fundamentals. We never lose sight on what our ultimate goal is and what are our objectives that we're wanting to achieve. And as long as we stay in that path, stay in that lane, I think we're going to continue to grow and get better.
Beautiful. Howie, what are your thoughts on it?
Oh my God, I don't know if I can add on anything that Jeff just said. That was like perfect. If anything, what Jeff just said, and maintaining a high level of marksmanship. What I do is self-defense training. And I think that we have to consistently maintain a high level of marksmanship, not only from a tactical anatomy perspective, but knowing that we can put those bullets where we need those bullets to go. As fast as we possibly can in terms of performance, which is nothing but the mastering of the fundamentals. But I see sometimes looser standards coming in terms of marksmanship, and I think we need to tighten those standards up. I'm all about 3x5 cards now. We need to, we can't accept sloppy shooting in a self-defense context. And that's definitely a function of mastering your fundamentals, your trigger press, getting that gun out with a sense of urgency, safely, but with a sense of urgency. So those are the things that I'm trying to work on my students with, even from the very beginning. Not only this is serious business that we're talking about, marksmanship needs to be at a high level, and your urgency needs to be there, right? We can't be sloppy with our presentation of the gun. We have to be focused at all times when we're doing these exercises because we're talking about life and death.
Yeah, it's refreshing to hear you say that, because it is, and in the same sentence, right? Like you said that you teach defensive shooting. We still have a marksmanship standard and a speed standard, and it's a cop out, and it's an excuse for crappy instructors, right? You still hit them. It's good enough, right? They talk about defensive accuracy in a gunfight, blah blah blah. You're shooting minute at man at 3 yards. You're doing great, and it's like you're full of crap, right? Because if they have to take a high level shot under stress, and you're over there giving them a attaboys for a minute of man at 3 yards, they're going to fail miserably in the moment that it matters the absolute most. And they're paying you good money to make them better, and you're not doing anything other than giving yourself a pat on the back and sending some people out there with false confidence and no skill set whatsoever.
That's exactly right.
And there are people out there charging $1,200 for a class, and they'll teach you how to shoot minute a man at 5 yards and make it look flashy, and it pisses me off.
And I'll go back to the earlier question you asked about one of the most important things I've learned. And I'm going to go back to Tom Gibbons. And what's one of the things he teaches very early on in IDC? He teaches that if he's a bad tennis coach, you suck at tennis, right? If he's a bad gun coach, you can get killed, hurt, go to jail, lose everything you own. And that woke my ass up, right, when I heard that, because he's exactly right. And that's exactly what you're talking about, Jeremy. And we can't lose sight of that. I'm glad you said that, man. Good stuff.
It's and I kind of harp on, and I get on the soapbox, and I'm talking about there are instructors out there that don't have accuracy standards for students, and I've been in a class where the instructor told me that they can't teach me anything. I said, well, I'll take my money, I'll shoot the rest of the day with you, I'll shoot these drills with you, but I'm paying you to teach me, not, you know what I mean? Like and it's just frustrating, because there are people putting their money, their trust in these folks, and for whatever reason, they're just not doing it right. They don't have accuracy standards. And there was a good, the first 4 or 5 years of my journey as a student, there was instructors that I looked up to, and I felt like that I had to get to their course, and I wanted to take their instructor level course, and I had joined their little I don't know if this looks familiar to you guys, but but that's where, years ago, you guys see that? I'll talk about that in the after show, right? Where I thought that was like the mecca, the gold standard. And then I, spent some more time and I got my head out of my butt and I realized that I was wrong. So it's important for our listeners and it's important for students to understand that there needs to be an accuracy component. There needs to be standards in these classes that you're taking. And it's okay to fail because that's where the learning comes, right? Like if you can shoot a 3-second bill drill all day and you go to class and you shoot a 3-second bill drill and you never fail, that's cool, but you're not getting better, right? And Jeff, you mentioned Michael Jordan and how many shots did he miss and how many hours and repetitions did he fail, right?
Yeah.
But you don't see that. No. And we all, we see the cool stuff on the gram. So
that's right.
That's a slide in this class, Jeremy. That is the actual slide in the class.
It is. And then following that up is another quote. He said, "Why would I be afraid of a shot I haven't taken yet?" I mean, and that's the mindset we have to have, right? And that comes from, as both of you guys just said, having accuracy standards and sticking to those and being true to that. Because you're never going to develop that confidence to go out and perform that way if you don't know that you can do it and you can do it on demand, right? Because that's a big deal, on demand performance. And I think we overlook that way too much too, which is why we start the course out the way we do in this course, right? I want to see what you can do on demand. And then it's my job to improve what you can do on demand before that weekend's over with, right? So, yeah.
That's what do you think the biggest or some of the bigger obstacles that students have coming into this class, Jeff?
Purely confidence. I think that's it because about a year ago, or I don't remember, it's been a long time now, we had at Patriot Training Center where I do most of my work, we had a little invite-only instructor course for our cadre down there, and Howard and Akil came to that too. And I got a lot of looks that weekend like, dude, you're on drugs, man, with what you want us to do. But every one of them performed and were able to do it. So I think I don't care if it's a gateway class or a little bit higher level course like this or instructor level course. I'm always going to strive to try to get my students to break some kind of glass ceiling because they can, right? If you look at human evolution throughout history, we're continually breaking through glass ceilings. I mean, just 50 years ago, if you told people what we were able to do now, they'd look at you like you were crazy. The same thing 10 years ago. So why would we relegate ourselves to this is okay and this is good enough? Because we're literally talking about life or death. We're not talking about Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals or Game 7 of the NBA Finals. We're talking about living and dying, going to jail, losing everything we own, or having to live with something that we've done for the rest of our life. So being able to just be here and that's okay it's not okay. If we're going to do this for real and we're going to take it serious, we need to continually improve those skills and strive to be better. But, that's an enthusiast take. Or as Akil would say, a true believer, maybe.
Well, we talk about glass ceilings, right? And it wasn't too long ago where the 4-minute mile was the absolute peak of human performance, and you couldn't run.
Never going to get any better, right?
Yeah. And it's interesting to see, kind of where I see that conversation, the firearms instructor kind of poke its head the most is when we're talking about out shooting our headlights and, and jailbait splits and all that good stuff. Mm-hmm. Then it'll be interesting to see what we, with the advancement of technology, and there's this big discussion going on right now about response to a visual stimuli versus an audible one, and what does that do? And I don't think we're there yet, right? Because we still don't know. Right now, even what I'm seeing in from some of the folks that are really devoting a lot of time, energy, and effort to this is it's still an analog decision, right? And it's not a decision that you have to make where you have to identify the target. Is it a threat? Is it not a threat? Might it be a threat? Was it a threat and is it no longer a threat? So there's all these other things that we have to consider, and there's not a Haley runs the D7 program, I think, which I believe tracks eye movement, and you can get some good statistical information from that. but I don't think we're there yet to settle that debate one way or the other. Our quarter second splits the fastest that we can shoot in a defensive shooting situation without creating some liability. So without going down a further a rabbit hole on that, unless you guys want to kick it back over.
Thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, let's do it then. Let's do it.
So I think as it currently sits right now, the answer to that is in reality-based training through some of the stuff like what I'm doing in this, and other people are doing the same thing, and force-on-force training. Because what's magical to me and what I love seeing when I do reality-based training, and this course was no exception, is I'm pushing people to their limits with what we're doing. I mean, if you're at 5 yards and you've got to draw from concealment and hit a parrot in 3 seconds with 3 rounds, that's pushing limits a little bit. I don't care how good of a shooter you are, right? And then when you get to the 8-inch circle, I'm cutting that par time down to 2. Right, so you're having to get that gun out and you're having to shoot those jailbait splits. But then I take them over to a reality-based training course of fire, and I come in and those splits reset automatically to a mechanical level, like clockwork, because it's an unknown thing. Now, are there exceptions to that? Yes. But what I do notice is those that have taken their skills up to a higher level and trained consistently, those jailbait splits do not carry over into that reality-based training setting. What happens is they're actually thinking, because they're not sitting there staring at a paper target or a cardboard target. They're actually staring at a person that is threatening them with a deadly weapon, and they've got the green light. So they're trying to make anatomically correct hits without a scoring zone, which is hard to do, right? Because unfortunately, as I tell my students, the bad guys quit wearing targets a long time ago. We've got to know where to shoot them. So when you see that target and you're having to, what I love about photorealistic targets, and students will argue with me, well, that target is too small. I don't care. Hit it where it needs to be hit, right? Because we're accountable for where that round goes. So yeah, that head may be a little bit small and you don't have a shot anywhere else. You better figure out a way to get your sights and trigger to work to make that hit. And when people are going through those scenarios, I see those. I don't like to say slowing down. I like to say they're verifying their sighting system, right? So they're doing that a little bit more with a little bit more discretion because of what they're actually seeing. Because what do we press the trigger with? It's not a finger, it's with our eyes, right? So that takes a little bit more time than when we're at that standard 7 yards shooting the A zone, because you're having to see what you've got to see before you can actually press that trigger. Hopefully that made sense. But I think that's the answer to that problem. I mean, I'm not knocking the things Holston and some of those guys are doing, because it's really unique and really cool. But what is ever going to replace walking into a well-done force-on-force scenario, and you have to react to what's going on? And what's really cool about that is you can win by not doing anything. Matter of fact, isn't that what we would rather have? If there's an escape route over here that our student learns to take that, he doesn't have to engage, or she doesn't have to engage, that there's other options out there. And then if there is no other option, get the gun out and do what you got to do, right? So there's no shot timer in that. It's just win or lose. So I think that's what we've got to figure out a way to get our students and pushing them towards that type of training at the end of the day. And how early in the progression that we can get them into that. I mean, I think there's a lot of ways to start them slow. Airsoft is a great thing. I start my armed staff off with airsoft before we progress. And even with an airsoft gun and photorealistic targets, it's amazing the emotional responses I see. And then by the time they progress up into that next level, that training, they're coming in and it's a totally different person. But I kind of got off track there. But I think that's the ultimate ground to figure out whether or not we're progressing the way we need to progress with our skill set and our mindset, and actually being able to apply that with accountability.
That makes sense. And I think one of the things that we don't introduce into that discussion or debate or whatever is the degradation of skill that somebody's going to have under that high stress, right? So if you can shoot 0.2 splits or 0.18 splits, right? We understand and we expect that there's going to be some skill degradation in that moment of truth, right? But if you need to shoot a 0.3 and the best you have is a 0.3 on the square range, you're probably not going to be able to shoot a 0.3 accurately, the minute your life depends on it. Howie, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that?
Well, one of the things that I did see, which I thought was very interesting during the reality-based training that we did with Jeff, was some people came into a scenario and just started shooting emotionally. I mean, just they saw the target that needed to be shot and just magdumped essentially into the target. It was just with no idea where the bullets were going. Yeah, I see it. That difference, and I think Jeff and I are in agreement that force on force and reality-based training is the way to actually condition people to be able to perform well in realistic environments. I too don't have anything against Holshin and the visual stimuli as opposed to the audible stimuli, but I think force on force is a much better way to be able to acclimate students to what they're going to find in the real world.
Yeah, because what do you see after a couple of runs? That emotional stuff starts to go away because it's no longer a novel stimuli anymore. Right. And we're starting to see and discern targets, and that's a big deal.
Yeah. Those guys, it's cool to see what they're doing, right? They're putting taking a scientific approach to it, and I love that. And it's going to be interesting to look back in 2 or 3, 4 or 5 years and say, hey, remember when we were talking about, the opportunities that had and some of the challenging points that it had, and look where it's at now. I want to kick it back over to the class, though. Howie, what advice would you have for somebody, if I were to come to you and I'm on the fence about taking this class, right? And what's the conversation look like from your perspective as somebody who's taken it with me, kind of walk me through how you would gauge whether or not I'm ready to take the class, and then what advice you might give to me as I was preparing to take that class.
Well, for most of the academic stuff that you're going to be learning, I think you're just going to be fine. That's going to be fine. The only concern I would have for you as a student in this class is whether your shooting skills are going to be up to par. So are you safe with a gun? Are your fundamentals down? Can you hit a target at 10 yards? Can you pass the test in the 90s, right? And if you can do that, then you can do everything in that class. He's not going to have you do anything that's, going to bring you too far above it, but he's going to raise your level. But I think anybody who could do the test is fine for that class. I think it's kind of like the similar standard that you would for someone who was going to Gabe White's class. You got to be safe with a pistol. You got to be able to holster and be able to get your gun out without, flagging anybody, keeping your fingers straight. Those things should not be concerns for you. And after that, you're good. I think it would be challenging, but I think you'll be able to handle it, and it's something that you would enjoy.
Love it. Jeff, kind of the same question for you. What advice do you have students, or what would you like to see if I said, hey, Jeff, I signed up for this class that you have coming up next month. I'm going to hit the range. I have 2 range sessions between then and now. What advice would you have for me to kind of better prepare myself for that class? Or is it one of those deals where it's, for me, sometimes it's like, hey, don't necessarily go out and do anything. Don't go buy a gun. Don't go buy a holster. Take the class first,
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with everything Howard just said, first of all. But the only real big advice I would do is get yourself straight on getting the gun out. Because Howard mentioned that earlier, and that's the big thing that everybody we run with, we're real big on that, is I hate the lackadaisical approach of getting the gun out, right? Because if you need the gun, you need the gun, right? I mean, why are we not taking that serious? So, and in this course in particular, being able to get your gun out and getting it into action is a big deal. But I say that not just for the course, but overall development of what we need to be able to do, right? Because it all starts, if you're not law enforcement, even if you are law enforcement, not every encounter starts with the gun out, right? We've got to get the thing into action. So that would be my big advice as far as just a technical thing coming into the course, on top of what Howard already said.
So vet your gear, because there's going to be a lot of drawing in this class.
Yeah, your gear needs to be squared away.
Lock-tech those mod wings and lock-tech those DCC clips, because you're coming in and out of that holster quite a bit.
And bring magazines. Yeah,
please bring magazines. He runs his class like Tom and Akil. There's no downtime. Keep rounds in your pocket.
I bring like 10 mags with me. I have so people, they begrudge the battle belt, right? So when I take a class, I run a battle belt, but I'm running my gun from appendix. The only reason I have the battle belt is so that I can run my magazines, and literally and really it's for the dump pouch. I'll keep a box of ammo, 2 boxes of ammo. That way, when the first relay is running, I'm stuffing the 2 or 3 mags that I just shot. And my idea is that, you know, the guy in class that has the ammo ready to go gets to shoot more, and I want to be that guy.
Yeah.
Right? That's
or doesn't get yelled at.
that too. Or from the instructor or the student, I'm taking it was a 3-day class that I was taking, and we're waiting on a dude to stuff his mag, and I'm like, get your shit together, buddy. Like, what are you doing? Like, you know how much money you paid for this class. You know who this instructor is. Why are we waiting on you to stuff
One of my
mags?
proudest moments as an instructor is my wife recently went and passed Tom's instructor development course, and I had the honor of getting the AI for that course, and on the first little break where he told people to go stuff mags, her and one other person that's associated with all of us were just standing there like, we're good. And I'm like, yeah. Girl, way to go.
That's awesome.
You'll only do that once in Tom's class.
Yeah, one time. That's it.
Yeah. And for God's sakes, there's no excuse for having a crappy holster, man. We are in the golden age of all things firearms training right now. And the Riley's holsters, right? KSG holsters with the Filster, the Enigma. There's so many, Tenacore. There are so many great, affordable holsters, right? Like 5 years ago, you'd pay $120 for a piece of crap holster that you saw on Instagram. And you're like, man, this thing is not comfortable at all. And
you're right. You should have 2 of them at least.
Yep. I run a Tenacore. I love that holster. I need to get my. I bought Memphis sold me his old Filster Enigma. I just got to figure out how to set that up and start running that.
Good luck.
Yeah. The beginning part of this year, I was running from a fanny pack because I was wanting to get more experience with off-body carry. We've started to see more female students, so I wanted to have a better informed perspective on that. But yeah, there's no reason to have crappy holster, crappy gear, or crappy gun, man. Like, it is really, it's like, what are we going to see in 5 years from now? And I don't know if it's going to be much more in the way of that stuff, because we're really,
it's pretty good stuff right now.
Oh yeah, we got some great stuff out there now.
Yeah. We were just having a conversation in our group text about the Beretta APX. You can get that gun for what, $300 now?
Yeah, PSA, yeah.
And it's a rock solid performer. So there's no reason.
Now, obviously, I want you to try BP9, but you go on and talk about your Beretta if you want to.
You know me, I'm going to shoot whatever is shooting best.
That's right.
Name on it says.
You got no loyalty, Jeff. I'm just putting it out there to you.
I got loyalty to making hits.
That's
where my loyalty lies.
Andy talked me into an HK, and then he showed up to the range with a new staccato.
Oh man.
It's so I'm gonna get an HK. That's gonna be my my gateway gun to the staccato. Man,
come on, whenever you're ready, Jeremy. We love to have you in the family.
I will say that Langdon P30.
Let me tell you.
That gun will run. That gun will run.
You got a .13 split out of that gun.
111.
It's crazy. He shoots it better than me. That's really upsetting.
I was one of these like minimalist gear guys, right? Having said that, my Glock 48 has a Shield Arms magwell. It has a Kegworks extended and raised slide release. It has a it has a match grade barrel on there that I put, has the 507K. So my Glock 48 is probably 50% more expensive than an HK at this point.
After you got done with it.
Yeah. And I'm like, man, and then I'm out there shooting Andy, running build drills with Andy, and I'm like, he's like, hey, shoot this HK, and I'm like, all right, and I'm like, okay. I get it. I'm a believer now. And then he ran that staccato at the match, and at the TacCon match, and I think he 16th in the initial deal. That was pretty.
Hey.
Yeah.
Yes.
Shoot off. Yeah.
So, Before we wrap up tonight, I know y'all are a couple hours ahead of us. Is there anything that we should have talked about with regards to this class that we haven't touched on?
Howard, I don't know. What do
Nothing
you
I
think?
can think of. Come on out and have some fun with Jeff. He's an amazing coach and instructor.
Yeah, I can't think of anything we left off there. I think we pretty much hit the whole lesson plan for the most part.
Awesome. I love it. That's always it's kind of, Andy and I talk about it. It's like, man, did we spend enough time on the class? Because I really want to, but it's so easy to go into all these different paths and conversations. But find more out. You can find your course offerings at Boren Training Solutions. That's for borentrainingsolutions.com. And then Howie, yours is hwmtraining.com.
Yeah.
And if you're not following Howie on Facebook or social media, you need to. I don't think I've ever come across one of your posts that was not insightful and extremely valuable. So check both of those folks out. Jeff Boren on Facebook, and then Howie as well. And then I'm going to give you guys the rest of your night back. I really do appreciate you jumping on with us. Howie, looking forward to having you on to review one of your courses. Jeff, it was great having you back on as an instructor. I can't believe it's been, 50 some episodes since we last spoke. I'm like,
yeah,
coming to this episode, I'm like, man, I feel like we just talked to Jeff.
right.
And then I looked and I'm like, no, that was episode 52. Episode 52, that was like 2020.
Wow.
I don't know if it was 2020. We've just been.
That's a body of work, my friend.
The last 8 months, we've been very consistent. But we're going on like our 6th or 7th year podcasting here, and we're barely at 108. So it's cool to have you guys back on, and I really do appreciate the conversation and the knowledge that you shared with us tonight. So thank you so much. We will see everybody next week. Remember, it's your life, it's your safety and protection, it's your responsibility. Y'all stay safe, and we'll see you next week.